Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2. This is the final season of Andor Season 2, and it perfectly, in my opinion, connects the story of Andor Season 1 to the story of Rogue One and making sure everything goes together. We're going to talk about each individual episode, and then we're going to talk about them in groups, and then we're going to talk about the season as a whole. Timestamps are down below. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and I just finished watching the first episode of Star Wars Andor Season 2 1 year later, because this episode takes place 1 year later from when Season 1 ended. So, to keep things brief and spoiler-free real quick, I thought the episode was really good. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, exciting. Whatever term you want to use, I think it was a good way to begin the season. Also, a lot of the stuff we saw in the promotional material did appear in this episode. Now, at the time of recording, I have not yet watched episodes 2 and 3, which I will be doing right after I finish recording. So, to give you guys a recap, the episode actually opens up with Andor stealing the tie. This is one of the big things we saw in the promotional material. He has his contact at Sign-Off Systems, who definitely... she's a bit nervous about this, but seems like she's doing pretty well. I hope everything good happens to her. Don't know for sure if we see her later on in the show or not. He eventually does get to the point where he's supposed to meet a fellow rebel and they're supposed to go take the tie someplace else. But he gets there and, yeah, that person is not there and there's a bunch of, well, not the brightest bunch of rebels. Apparently they're connected with what's a brigade led by a character named Maya, and apparently is a mutiny. Yeah, the episode ends and they are fighting about whatever's going on, and Cassian's stuck in the middle of it trying to, do his own job. Meanwhile, Masma's, well, her daughter's getting married. We knew that from season 1, and now the wedding's actually going to be going on, and apparently it's going to be, a pretty big wedding going on. All that. Lucen's there, yes, Lucen's there, who Mama was not expecting, but apparently Lucen knows, the person so the father of the groom. Apparently Lucen knows that person. And also, during the conversations, during the partying, Lucen's clearly fishing for information. It's like, come on, you're a flight cadet or something, and here's this guy asking you about who you are, where you're training, and who you're training with, and where you're going to be going. Operational security is apparently not a thing in the Empire, unless you're among Director Krennic's group, because they're planning to do something to Ghorman in order to get a mineral extracted that could destroy this planet, but they need to make the Ghormans look bad so they can justify it all, especially in case the planet destabilizes and go boom by accident. And apparently there's operational security there. Helps threatening people by saying, hey, if you spill bean of what's happening here, I'm going to tell the Emperor. Apparently that's enough to keep a lot of people quiet. But that's pretty much what goes on in the episode. I thought it was fun and exciting. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I'll see you for episode 2. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and welcome to my review of the second episode of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Sagroma Teema, which, just for context, and as we discover in the episode, that is a greeting on Chandrila, Mon Mothma's home world. I'm not sure if it's related specifically to marriage, or it can be used in other contexts as well. But speaking of all that, there's more of that going on. There's more things going on. Apparently, Leia has the first fight with her betrothed, but then during one of the ceremonies, apparently there's a lot of traditions involved, but apparently Perrin gives a speech and just basically, hey, trouble will occur. You just gotta find a way to work beyond that. So, hey, he's actually stepping up a little bit as a father. And then, of course, there's everything going on with Mon Mothma and Take Home. It seems like things are not going to be going good there. Lucen seems to be catching on about things going on there. Yeah, lots of complicated intrigue stuff. And to finish talking about it, I think I've got to wait for episode 3. But before we talk about episode 3, which is going to be my next short, so stay tuned for that, we need to talk about what's going on first with Andor, because he's stuck on this world waiting. And basically, he's somewhat babysitting these disorganized rebels. Yeah, not going on too well, but eventually he takes a opportunity when they're fighting each other, because, yeah, they're just not getting along very well. And he takes off, and we see what planet he's on. Huge spoilers. It's Yavin 4. I did not expect to see that. I'm going to assume This is before the Masashi group was founded. That's just my best guess. But yeah, I can't believe that they actually chose Yavin 4 to be this plan. But it makes sense that a relatively uninhabited plan would be used by the rebels for both meeting places and as a future base. So that's going on there. And then I forgot to talk about this with episode 1, but with Bix, Brasso, B2, they're on a plan, I forget the name, but it's a farming community and they're working as mechanics, keeping things fixed. Well, anyhow, Imperial inspection time, and they're concerned because they're technically not there legally, and they have to deal with that. And oh yeah, by the way, the Imperial Lieutenant is hitting on Bix and she's not happy about it, which makes sense. She was tortured by the Empire, and I've seen it in the previous episode. She has some lingering trauma about that, and Tony Gilroy definitely made the choice to frame that trauma as one of assault. Not just like physical assault, but emotional, mental abuse, and sexual assault. That's definitely how he chose to frame it, which makes sense. Severe torture will exhibit, I would assume. I've never been tortured, but definitely creative. So let me know your thoughts on episode 2 in the comment section down below, and stay tuned for episode 3. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episode 3, Harvest. So a lot happens in this episode. We of course got Mon Mothma's daughter, her wedding finishes up, and Mon Mothma actually lets loose at the party a little bit, dancing and all that. Probably does need it. Probably does, but doing all that because Lucian's finding out everything about Mon Mothma's financial difficulties and Takoma's involvement, and whatever's going on with Takoma is probably not going to be good for Mon Mothma. Well, apparently he gets Cinta to show up. Finally, Vel gets to see Cinta, but she knows Cinta's there because Lucian brought her here because, yeah, Takoma, he's not getting out of that speeder alive. I'm positive of that. So, yeah, so that's happening. Meanwhile, during all of this, I have not even talked about the plot point in the previous 2 episodes going on with Cyril Khan and Dedra Moa. Apparently, they're living in the same apartment, and Dedra's meeting Cyril's mother. But she does put Cyril's mother in her place, so that's something. But still, I have a feeling they're both using each other. I don't know why. I'm going to talk about that hopefully when I get into my full review, but apparently that's going on, and might actually be good for Cyril somehow. Who knows what's going on there, but we also got the big thing with Cassian. He does finally get in contact with somebody, and Lucian's assistant, but he finds out that the plan that Bix and Brasso and B2 are on is in a communication blackout. So, of course, instead of listening for instructions, he goes right there to rescue them because he assumes the Empire is doing something. And yeah, the Empire is doing something. Oh, and by the way, that lieutenant who was hitting on Bix, yeah, he was doing more than hitting on Bix. Tony Gilroy actually decided to call it what it was in the episode. That Imperial lieutenant tried to rape Bix. Bix successfully defended herself, though. She did not give that lieutenant an inch. And, well, he paid the price for it. Unfortunately, though, while Cassian was able to take out the Imperial troops that was, doing their patrol and likely going to arrest them all for being there illegally, if Bix didn't do, basically, if Bix under force consented, which would not be actual consent. But yeah, that's what the lieutenant was trying to do as well. Extortion, fascist scum. Or should I say imperial scum? Same difference. But unfortunately, Brasso does not make it. He is shot. Here's a chance that he might be nursed back to health. Yeah, don't think so. This I don't think it's going to be that positive. This is Andor, not Happy Fun Time Place. So yeah, but overall, very good episode. Can't wait till I can talk about all 3 of these episodes together, but we're going to have to wait for that. But in the meantime, let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and of course, may the Force be with you, always. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of the first 3 episodes of Star Wars Andor Season 2. Episode 1 is 1 year later, because it takes place 1 year later. Kind of obvious when you think about it. Episode 2 is Sagroma Teema, which is a Chandrilan greeting that's at least associated with weddings, as we see with Mon Mothma's daughter actually getting married. And then episode 3 is Harvest, and well, looks like the Empire is coming to collect. But that's all to say that there's a lot to talk about. These 3 episodes were great. I thought they were fun. There's basically 4 plot lines going on, and 2 of the 4 do come together at the end of episode 3 Harvest, or during episode 3 Harvest, I should say. And of course, there is a little bit of connection too with one of the other plot lines. But let's just talk about it in each of the 3 plot lines as they go. I will be mixing episodes, of course, and spoilers abound. So let's focus on Cassian Andor first. His plot line goes, well, and starts, I should say, at Sign-On Fleet Systems because he's stealing a prototype TIE. He has a contact inside who's nervous about that, but he says that's good because it keeps you alert. And yeah, I think that does actually make sense. You're nervous, you're alert, you are aware of what's going on, and you may actually do something about it. It keeps you from getting complacent, if you will. But anyhow, the stealing the TIE, though, it's a prototype. It does not go without a hitch. One, Andor doesn't know how to fly the TIE because it's so different than every other thing. It's a good thing that I think that Andor's stealing it because I don't think the Empire needs another advanced TIE. And apparently he looks like he's chased by some TIE advances, specifically the V1, which is not Darth Vader's TIE, which is a TIE Advance X1. No, this is the Grand Inquisitor, and a few other characters got to pilot it in Star Wars Rebels. Slightly different advanced TIE, but that's just what it looked like to me. But that was great. Andor kept on crashing, but not crashing. He does get away. He goes to his contact point, but his contact is dead because apparently another rebel accidentally mooned themselves or crash landed on that planet and killed him because he was not friendly to them. Yeah, I think they're called the Maya Brigade, but that group of these I think are the least intelligent. Yeah, they're not the brightest rebels in the bunch, and Andor's probably like, why did I have to deal with these? And yeah, Andor's captured because he's in a time with an Imperial test pilot uniform, so of course he's an Imperial, even though they're not listening to him. But he does get away, and we discover that the plane was Yavin 4, which is cool. I can't believe they actually did that because Tony Gilroy, well, yes, he knew Season 2 was going to connect more into Rogue One and all that, but was not big on doing no Easter eggs for the sake of Easter eggs. But it does kind of make sense that what would become the rebel base for Massassi Group and thus and later the bigger rebel alliance would initially probably get started as a place where rebels will rendezvous and meet up to exchange information, supplies, etc. That actually does make some sense. And then he goes flying away, leaving them to fight each other and the beasts on Yavin, and he gets in contact with Lucen's assistant, and he discovers that the plane that Bix, Brasso, B2, and I forget where I think are on is in a communication blackout. And before I talk about what happens next, we gotta talk about what's actually going on in the plane. So they're basically Bix, Brasso, Cassian when he's there, where they're all working as mechanics. Technically they're illegally, so they're illegal immigrants because they don't have a valid visa. But you know what? They're helping out and they're also laying low and all that. And it seems like some members of the community are aware of their status and are trying to help them hide. The one's definitely doing more than the other who may or may not have ratted them out to the Empire. I'm not quite sure. But doing all that, we've seen some nice community. B2 has made friends with other droids and all that. And they actually have a picture of Marvel Andor right next to their communications. I thought that was just so great and nice callback, a reminder, if you will. And, well, eventually the Empire does come up for an inspection. That's kind of given away because I mentioned that the Empire has a communication blackout on that planet, and that's apparently standard procedure during these inspections, and all that, making sure visas in order, that quotas are being met, all that jazz. Well, one of the lieutenants, the lieutenant in charge of this, apparently his eye catches Bix and decides to flirt with her. She's not happy about it. I don't know if she and Cassian are married or not, but she's definitely at least saying that to try to get that imp off her back. Yeah, it doesn't work because later on when they actually arrive for their formal inspection, he goes to where Bix is living alone and tries to rape her. Yes. Tony Gilroy went that far, and I think the scene was well done, but it was very hard to watch. But this is probably, and Tony Gilroy actually had it called out for what it is in the episode, using the word, which I'm just so impressed, and I applaud him for that, because that does take some guts. Because if you know the internet, the fact that I actually said the word in this review means this video probably will not be monetized, which is sad. But that's the way the internet goes at times. But I gotta give Big Sis. She defended herself and did not give that imperial scum, that fascist scum, an inch. She did not. She defended herself and took him out. And then she also took out the driver too. Will tried his best too, but she got better aim. And then that's when Cassian arrives. He uses the tiny stone to eliminate the Imperial Zero, but unfortunately not before Brasso is shot. He was hoping that Brasso might be able to get Nurse back to help, because he definitely seems to have gotten close to one of the members on that planet, and it seems like they might have been kindling a relations. So there's that. So maybe, but no, probably not. This is Star Wars Andor, not Star Wars Happy Fun Time Place where everything goes right. That's not that show. I would like it to be. I want everything to have a happy ending, but we gotta be realistic about the time frame and everything that happens. Andor eventually dies as well, so spoilers, I guess. But anyhow, all of that. And then they evacuate the plane, leaving B2 behind. Why did you leave B2 behind? But B2 is in the kill of that character, I forget her name, but that Brasso was close with. So, at the very least, B2 is safe, and hopefully B2 will come back around. Please. Cassian and B2 need at least one scene together before the show ends, please. And that covers those two plots, but we still got the plot going on with, well, actually, we're going to wait on months. We're talking about what's going on with Syrah and Jedha, because that's not something I was expecting. First of all, Dedra's being let in on part of Project Stardust because they need a specific mineral that you can mine, that the Empire can mine on Ghorman, but they need to basically make the Ghormans look bad so they can justify mining, relocation, and all that. Apparently, they consider everything from fake natural disasters to fake, plagues and all that to try to get volunteer, blah, blah, blah. But Dedra's basically like, well, you can do propaganda to make them look bad as you want, but you need some, actual Ghorman insurgents that you can control who can make bad decisions and do things at the wrong time, wrong place to make them look even worse. Controlled opposition. That's what Dedra's suggesting, and she's not happy with that because she still wants to track down Access, who we know is Lutheran. And apparently, Dedra and Syrah are living together now. Okay. I feel sorry for both of them because I think Dedra is just using Syrah to track down Access, and Syrah, well, I think he's more attracted to Dedra for her power than anything actually about her character. So yeah, I don't know how that's going to be healthy or not, but apparently that's going on. But apparently one good thing is, seems like Dedra put Syrah's mother in her place, called her out for basically emotionally abusing her son. So there is something there. I don't understand it, but another thing too, seems like things are going good for Syrah in his work, because apparently he's been promoted, and just like he was introduced to the Bureau of Standards, he's now introducing somebody else, and he's actually giving the Bureau of Standards a lot more credit, because he claims that he cracked down a fraudulent, ring of corrupt supply officers or something like that. But there's not too much going on there. We're going to have to wait to see. But Ghorman's definitely going to come up, and things are going to go crazy. But speaking of Ghorman, apparently one of the guests at Mon Monster's wedding, Lucien was talking to, who was half Ghorman, half Chingerland, so who knows how that's going to now work into things. And Lucien, yeah, he ended up attending the wedding for Mon Monster's daughter. It's crazy. Apparently he's a friend of the groom's father and has a wedding gift, which is a rare piece of artwork that was stolen tens of millennia ago by the Rakata. Nice call out to the Rakata, but it's just kind of insane though. And also Lucien, he's being his old spy self, he's getting information from the guests, and he's picking up that Mon Monsters might have had financial difficulties and went to take coma and all that to get things sorted out, but things are not going too well because apparently something's going on with Tacoma. So what does Lucien do? Well, he contacts Cinta, who replaces Tacoma's driver, and I don't think Tacoma's going to be walking out of that speeder alive. Correction, he's not going to be walking out of it. When he's leaving it, he's going to be limp, if you know what I mean. And that's actually when Cinta and Vel actually see each other. The only time they haven't seen each other in apparently a while. Given their line of work, that does kind of make sense. But Vel, she knows what Cinta is doing though, and probably why. Yeah, so things are not going too well on Chandrilla. Mon Monster also tries to give her daughter an out of the wedding, and her daughter rejects it in the form of rebellion. But I wonder if Mom Masura did that on purpose, knowing her daughter was going to rebel and then actually do it. I do wonder. But hey, I gotta give Perrin this. He gave a Father of the Bride speech, and he actually gives some pretty solid advice that there will be fights, there will be troubles. It's about working through them and finding what works and what you guys actually like. He actually made some good points in that. So yeah, lots of going on there. I still can't believe just how all that lined up, and that the Mom Monster part line is somewhat connected with the Cassian Andor line. That's only because Lucian's assistant returns to Coruscant, so that way she had access to her main communication stuff, so she can actually talk to people, because she can't do that on Chandrila. Is that everything? Because I'm sure it's not, but hey, it's what I got for you, and I would love to hear so much more in the comments. There's some very interesting stuff, some great stuff. I mentioned how the Imperial officer tried to all-word Bix. Well, there's this moment where he looks at himself in the mirror, which is a callback way back in the first episode where Bix is woken up with a nightmare. Specifically, it's like it's the phantom of the Imperial scientist that tortured her in season 1, who the phantom also stops and looks at the mirror before approaching Bix. Very much Tony Gilroy has recontextualized that moment from episode 1 to become a parallel to what happens to Bix later on with Imperial Officer, but this time she's able to resist. She has the tools at her disposal, and she's able to resist and give the Imperial scum what for. Something that she was not able to given the situation way back in season 1. It's tragic, mind you, but it's so good from a filmmaking and storytelling perspective. These episodes did not shy away from anything. Things that were left unstated were left that way on purpose, I'm sure. They, hits harder, like, oh yeah, we know what's going on, and all that. But also what was stated, like, Tony Gilroy did not have to have the characters outright say the R word, but he chose to. Chose to frame it as what it is, a violation, a act of Imperial aggression. Imperial might be actually the right term, because Imperials, in real life, Imperialists, yeah, they take what they want without consideration of everyone else. Isn't that so fitting? It's like this poetry. It rhymes or something. But anyhow, now that I got that George Lucas quote out of the way, let me know your thoughts on these 3 episodes in the comment section down below. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm John Barry 555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episode 4, Ever Been to Ghorman. So like I said, this is the 4th episode of Season 2. We have a 1-year jump from the previous episodes, and there's a bit of a twist going on. In the past 3 episodes, we saw a hint of, Dedra and Ciro's domestic life. Here we get Cassian and Bix's domestic life, which is just a neat little twist while Ciro is doing some undercover spy ops, like kind of a twist on the formula going on. There's a lot going on. Mom Monster's trying to gather votes up to end the PORD in the Senate, and she's just not getting votes. Even the Senate from Ghorman, no luck, because he's afraid of making waves with the Empire because of all the pressure that the Empire and propaganda the Empire is putting on. There's just a lot of interesting stuff. Ciro is being tasked by Dedra to infiltrate the Ghorman front in order, probably so that way they can use the Ghorman front to make the Ghormans look even worse for Imperial propaganda purposes, which is already working, at least on Ciro's muzzle. So we got a little complex spidiness going on there. Lucian learns that Dedra is now working with something involving Ghorman because of Lon and his contact in the ISB, who also, by the way, seems to be trying to, he probably already has some quote-unquote friends, but maybe get some other contacts with other ISB supervisors who are frustrated, overwhelmed with everything they have to do to probably doing other spy stuff going on. Like I said, a lot of stuff going on, but the episode pretty much ends with Lucian sending Cassian to Ghorman to figure out what's going on the ground. And yeah, but a huge thing going on is the trauma that Bix suffered way back in season 1 is still present, and you can tell it's affecting her. And even Cassian, you can tell everything he has to do is also affecting him, but in a different way. In all honesty, probably one of the biggest things about Andor so far has been all the hard realism, for lack of a better term, raw emotions going on in it that just really just builds. And there's a lot of this episode, and the short review will not do it justice. So we're going to continue discussion in the comment section down below, and stay tuned for my review of all 3 episodes that dropped recently. So stay tuned for that. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episode 5, I Have Friends Everywhere. So this episode continues off where the previous episode left off, obviously. The Empire's here, they're infiltrating the Ghorman front, trying to get them to act up. Meanwhile, Cassian's there for Luthen, trying to also contact the Ghorman front, give them maybe some advice, figure out what they're about, so this can learn about. Meanwhile, Luthen has a whole issue because a piece of artwork that he bugged that he gave to a, what's his name? The father of the boy who married Mon Mothma's daughter had piece bugged, and apparently another piece of artwork was fake from a different dealer, and now all the artwork is going to be taken care of, so that's stressing Luthen out. I haven't even mentioned the stuff going on with Saw, where they're stealing Rydomium thing, but not for uses as weapons of fuel or anything like that. No, for personal use. Yeah. Thor is a bit insane, and he's definitely going very much, I would say, anarchist, druggist route. It seems like the way he's going. I can see why the rest of the Rebel Alliance decide to distance themselves from him. He's a bit crazy. That's essentially the main stuff going on. All this stuff obviously has not come together yet. I'm just waiting for the Cassian's arc stories going on, and Seals, they're going to come together probably in an explosive fashion. I should also mention Bix is still struggling with dreams, not being able to sleep, and has resorted to some kind of sleep aid that probably won't help her in the long term. There's definitely a connection there where it seems like substance use, it seems to be a plot point that is being weaved into these episodes. How that's going to develop, I'm not so sure. Like I said, a lot of interesting stuff going on. It's going to develop, looks like it's going to be developing in a very interesting way. Heading for what I'm going to assume is an explosive finale with what we all know is coming, the Ghorman Massacre. Whether that's going to be the next episode or in the next set of episodes remains to be seen. But in the meantime, I want to hear your thoughts on this episode in the comment section down below, and stay tuned for when I review all 3 episodes later today. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episode 6, What a Festive Evening. So in this episode, there's a bunch of stuff going on. We have Vel and Cinta reuniting on Ghorman to help them out with their little heist against the Empire. The heist goes on with pretty well except for one hit, because while they did tell the Ghorman front not to use any blasters, one did bring one and accident discharged it, hitting Cinta. Yeah, that was taking it better than I would have thought, especially because, they were rekindling their relationship after being apart basically for 2 years without seeing each other, thanks to Luthen. And speaking of Luthen, he's going to a party so that way he can remove a listening device on one of the artifacts he sold to someone. And during that time, a bunch of who's of the show, everyone who's not on Ghorman and not Cassian or Bix, because we have Mon Mothma, we got Perrin, we got Luthen, of course, we got his assistant, whose name I forgot, but she's getting a lot of great moments so far in the season. We also have Director Krennic of all people, we have Luthen's contacting the ISB, a bunch of stuff going on, all converging, and the listening device is removed. I think Luthen's also feeling better because he's starting to tell jokes. He joked that they should have taken Krennic out while they were at the party. That would have probably saved a lot of effort and definitely affected how Rogue One would have gone. And during all this, Bix and Cassian aren't doing too much, except for one thing. Earlier in the episode, Luthen's contacting another person. They're informed by the director and the ISB that they're going to be basically providing security for a project that basically the person who tortured Bix, that project's going to go beyond the ISB into the entire Imperial military. And then later on, well, we don't know who he told, but I can definitely say this. Bix and Cassian found out because Bix got her revenge. Hopefully it's cathartic for her, but I don't really see that as her getting her revenge for what that doctor put her through way back in Season 1. Rather, I see it as her finally being able to face her demons and hopefully be able to get into a mental state where they will still always be there, where they will no longer be controlling her life. Because she subjects him to the same torture that he subjects her to, and who knows how many other victims that we have not yet seen on screen and probably will never see told in the Star Wars story, just implied. And then they also decide to, I think, blow up the office as well, at least some Imperial office. They didn't get to do, Cassian and Bix did not get to do much in this episode except for at that very end. But just like way back 3 episodes ago, you have the different quote-unquote actions being as the episode ends, being told back to back to each other, reinforcing them and having the music beats all come together. It's just really well put together. But that's what I got to say here, so stay tuned for my full review coming out later today. In the meantime, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm John Bayer 555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2 Episodes 4, 5, and 6. Episode 4 is Have You Ever Been to Ghorman? Episode 5 is I Have Friends Everwhere, and Episode 6 is What a Festive Evening. So, this is the second arc of the show so far, and it continues on. We're getting into the Ghorman stuff. Cyril has been tasked basically by the Empire, by Jedha, to go to Ghorman, heading the Imperial Bureau of Standards Division office there in order to, get in contact with the Ghorman Front, because they want to, try to provoke the Ghorman Front into doing something, so that way they can justify, harsher realities, harsher reprisals on Ghorman because of everything they want to do and the minerals they want to extract from Ghorman. And that stuff eventually comes together with everything going on with Cassian, Lucen, and also we got Cinta and Vel back as well. Because Lucen wants to see what they're all about because they're making a little more noise, nothing violent yet. And so he sends Cassian to investigate, and basically Cassian says yeah, they don't know what they're doing. And he thinks it would be a waste of time to go there while Ventus and Cinta and Vel were already sent in. Lucen already clearly had planned that to basically advise them on what to do and how to actually accomplish a heist against the Empire. And the heist does go on in the final episode along the same time while Lucen's assistant, whose name is escaping my brain, is using Lucen's asset in the ISB to block other people from seeing her remove a listening device that they had put in a piece of artwork that was put in, I forget his name, but the father of the groom who married Mom Monster's daughter. By the way, Mom Monster was in that room while our listening device was being removed, as well as Olsen Krennic and a bunch of other people as well. So that was just a crazy thing going on there. How did that go on? But the device gets removed, and Lucen's feeling a little better because you can tell throughout these past 3 episodes, Lucen was getting more and more agitated. The stress is clearly getting to him, but remove that listening device and then being able to crack a joke afterwards, he seems to be getting a little better. That joke, if they had actually acted on that joke before he told the joke, Rogue One would have been gone very differently if Krennic was in the picture. There's several other things as well going on. Cassian's actually kind of a minor player in these 3 episodes. His main role, like I said, was to investigate the Ghorman Front, see what they're all about, and report back to Lucen. But a bigger part of his story, along with Bix's story, is a little bit about the relationship, but more about helping Bix overcome her demons, because the torture that she suffered by the hands of that ISB doctor and back in season 1 have not left her. It has left lasting scars. It's making her not sleep well and all that, making her turn to some kind of sleep aid that won't help her in the long run. Also, honestly, everyone's also starting to get mad at Lucen. Bix not as much as Cassian, but Cassian is definitely mad that Lucen spoke to Bix and didn't tell him, and basically because he thinks Lucen's overworking her, and yeah, kind of in her mental state, she probably is being overworked a bit. But also, Ventus but also Vel and Cinta are getting frustrated at Lucen as well for kind of using them. Lucen's making enemies among his allies. And that probably includes Sagroma because he's going crazy, stealing Rhydonium as not to be used as a fuel or anything like that, but as a substance. And Wilhelm, getting him involved in that, that's not going to go well. It's just not. And now, honestly, I totally understand why the rest of the Rebel Alliance, one has let Lucen probably fade into the echoes of history, and why they'll distance themselves from Saw later on in the timeline, because Saw is a bit crazy. And the death of his sister way back in the Clone Wars is still affecting him deeply as well, because he drops... He mentions her elusively, but unless you know what he's talking about, you might think he's just crazy, and he is just crazy, but he's crazy with being crazy at the same time. Does that make sense? Because it barely does, because, And, clearly that, though, he wasn't doing that to hurt the Empire. He was doing that for really personal reasons. But, of course, that's not all that's going on. Why would that be all that's going on? Because everything comes to a head. Honestly, my small reviews are blending together, but Cinta does not survive helping the Ghormans heist, because while they told the Ghormans only Val and Cinta will carry blasters, one of them still carried the blaster and fired it, not knowing what to do, and accidentally shot Cinta. And, Val's taking it way better than so they had started that last episode, rekindling their relationship, but then the incident happens during the heist. And she's holding it together, but barely. She kind of lays it off on that Ghorman front member who clearly is regretting his actions. But at the same time, it's like, when you're in that line of work, you got to, be prepared not to make mistakes. And because with the Empire having Cyril there, Cyril's spying on what's going on, so he hears the shot going on, and he doesn't know what's happened, but the fact that a shot was fired, that is going to go right into the Empire's hands, which is exactly what they wanted. The Empire wanted the Ghorman Front rebels to do something, and they wanted a mistake to be made, and the mistake was made. Cassian was right in many regards. The Ghormans were not ready for this. But Lucen is an accelerationist. He wanted something to happen. He wants to provoke the Empire. And in the long run, he's actually kind of right. I'm not a big fan of accelerationism, but in the way the Star Wars is telling the story of the Rebel Alliance fighting the tyranny and authoritarianism of the Empire, accelerationism is valid within the context of the story. And if you can achieve goals without being an accelerationist, you should. And I don't believe accelerationists are a valid form of ideology. I feel like that causes more harm than good. But Star Wars, this time frame in Star Wars specifically, is set in a time period where things are already bad. You can't make things much worse. And that's the only time I could see potentially that being a valid interpretation, but I still personally am not a big fan of accelerationism. But that's getting outside the context of Andor. But is it really? Because Lucen has since season 1 always been described as an accelerationist. But the main thing I want to talk about, actually the two main things left to talk about, is the ending. So the main ending of there's the ending where, like in the first 3 episodes, they have all the plot lines, basically the final action going on the same time, but not, because the combination of Cassian and Bix's story in these 3 episodes is separate. So you have Lucen's assistant disarming or removing the listening device while the heist is going on and cutting back and forth there. Saul's stuff was finished in the last episode, doesn't really play a role here. So that goes on, but at the same time, once that's done, we get to see what Cassian and Bix were up to, which involved breaking into an Imperial facility. That ISB doctor from season 1 gets Bix strapping him to his own torture device and making him bear his own torture before she leaves the building, dispatching an Imperial guard, which, by the way, that was causing her issues way back at the start of these 3 episodes, where Cassian had to dispatch an Imperial army trooper because he saw what was going on. and that could have compromised their mission. So, and then they detonate an explosive, killing the doctor, I guess. As shown with Bix, you can definitely somewhat recover from the torture, though the lasting trauma lasts. And while you could read that scene as Bix taking her revenge, given how they've presented this a lot as her demons, this is more her confronting her demons, confronting them. And once they're confronted, they're going to be easier to not necessarily forget about, but move past, but deal with, to live with, without those demons controlling Bix's life. And I think once that happens, Cassian, lighten up a little bit too. So, really great ending and a good cathartic moment for Bix to really let her confront her demons and confronting the source of her demons specifically. Now, is there more to talk about? Oh, definitely. Small things here and there, such as the Ghormans are given a French accent. I don't know how close the language is to actual French. I don't know enough words in French. I can say bonjour, au revoir, I can count, but anything major, no. Yeah, not that knowledgeable. But giving the Ghorman that French connection, they did the same thing with the Twi'leks as well. But that makes it very easy, I think, to connect them to World War II and the French resistance, the French partisans, and also the French, or was it that Spanish? Yeah, no, I think both of them had resistance groups called Maquis back in World War II. But I think that's fitting because Ghormans are known for their fabric, their silk, which comes from spiders. And while that silk is normally historically more associated with China than France, fashion is associated with France, and so that's a good connection to draw on. But also, by connecting them to French and French culture, with the use of the accent, the same thing as they did with Twi'leks, we can connect them to a group that is well known for resisting authoritarianism, for standing up for the rights. There's a reason why the French Revolution is such a big deal in history. Well, even in U.S. history classes, the French Revolution is mentioned in more than just passing. We probably know more about the French Revolution from U.S. history classes than we do the Glorious Revolution in the U.K. and everything with that and lead up to that. Did I say UK when I meant US earlier? It doesn't matter too much. But it does matter, but not for the context of this discussion, where that association to the French with resistance, with rebellion, with overthrowing tyranny is, I think, a very deliberate choice by Tony Gilroy and everyone else involved in Star Wars Andor Season 2. It helps create a sense that we can relate to, a sense that helps confirm, that helps establish something without spelling something outright. Because when you spell something outright, you might be able to lose some nuance. You maybe even fail to convey something, but using things like music, which Andor has done a phenomenal job, and accents, you can start conveying stuff. They give Saw a very whispery, raspy voice, and that conveys that he's maybe not all there. That conveys something that them just saying it outright would not have been able to. And the Ghorman French-inspired accent does that as well. So if there's more we want to say, the comment section is open down below, so let's keep the discussion going on there. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episode 7, 8, and 9. Episode 7, Messenger. Episode 8, Who Are You? And Episode 9, Welcome to the Rebellion. So we're going to talk about each individual episode, and then I'm going to talk about all three together, so stay tuned. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and I'm continuing my reviews of Star Wars Andor Season 2 with Episode 7, Messenger. So, another year has passed, the Empire is tightening its grip on Ghorman, but the Ghorman front is also getting more bold in its opposition to the Empire. Not are they just doing peaceful stuff, they're doing more violent stuff, more attacks and that. The Empire is obviously playing up more the attack angle, because they're trying to make the Ghormans look bad because of their agenda, because they want to strip mine the planet and they need to get the people out of the way. and they still somewhat care about public perception, so they're not just going to go in right away. The Senate is still around after all. We are reminded that because Mon Mothma, she's going into the Senate for some kind of meeting, briefly speaks with the Ghorman senator who thanks her for her courage in that and reminds her to keep herself safe. And I think, knowing what we know from Star Wars Rebels, we're getting to the point where Mon Mothma will take a stand where her only way to stay safe is to fully commit to the rebellion and run away from Coruscant, for lack of a better description. But other stuff is going on. For example, Dedra tells Cyril to pack his bags and leave. She knows the crackdown is coming, and you can tell she is truly, I think, killing for Cyril. Whether it started as manipulation originally or not, I think she has developed actual feelings for him, and he clearly has actual feelings for her. But on her end, initially I was thinking mostly manipulation going on and putting up a front, but I'm thinking that is changing for her. And hence why, with she knowing the crackdown is coming, she's trying to get him out of the way so he will hopefully stay safe. That's at least how I interpret that scene. Meanwhile, Cassian and Bix, they're on Yavin. We get to see a little bit of the Yavin base. It's growing. We get to see where the people are actually sleeping and all that. Cassian and Bix seem to have a nice little hut in the jungle. It seems like a pretty pleasant life. Except for Cassian has a blaster burn that's not healing that well. And Bix takes him to a Force hero who definitely senses more in Cassian that he's like a special role in the rebellion in a sense. There's a lot of cryptic stuff going on, but definitely there's some interesting stuff there. And during all this too, Ghorman came back, so it seems like he separated from Saw and is working with Lucen again, because a year has passed. So Lucen is still around, and people are happy to be away from him. Both Bix and Vel are happy not to be taking orders from Lucen anymore. Seems like Cassian as well, but reconnecting with him, he's going to come back to Ghorman for one probably final mission for Lucen. And that probably will be inciting the Imperials to do the Ghorman massacre. I think it's going to be really interesting how it develops in the next 2 episodes. There's a lot more to discuss, so the comment section is down below. Star Wars Andor, Episode 8, Who Are You? Broke me. I've never felt such feelings after watching any work of fiction. I'm John Barry 555, this is the Jedha Ranger, and we need to talk about that episode. This episode had something to say. It put us in the Ghorman massacre. It didn't tell us about it, it put us in it. The closest I've ever felt to what I felt after this is when I watch history stuff, especially recreations of historic events, including tragedies. Band of Brothers, Why We Fight, is one of those examples. But with history, it's in the past. There's a sense of fait accompli about it. It's done. There's nothing you can do. You can only reflect on and learn from it. You can feel saddened by it. You can feel sorrow about it. But you don't often feel in it. And that's something I think a lot of people who do documentaries and that, and even historical dramatization, sometimes forget. They forget how to put you, the audience, in the event for feeling. Now granted, documentaries are often trying to be objective, so they hope the events speak for themselves. But historical dramas, on the other hand, they're set in the past, they're set during a historical event, and they're supposed to get you to feel something. They're supposed to be a dramatization. They are supposed to take more artistic license in a documentary. But Tony Gilroy and the rest of the creative team behind Star Wars Andor did that for a piece of fiction. They put you in a piece of fiction the way I feel like a lot of historical dramatizations fail to do. Perhaps it's because, especially first time, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what characters are going to make it out alive or not. And they worked that into the story. They made you feel like you were there on Ghorman with Cassian, with Cyril, with Ghorman, with all the members of the Ghorman Front. They made you feel there. They made you care about the characters. And it is so much better for that. Don't know if I'll ever be able to rewatch the episode, but they did such a superb job in the episode. They showed the Empire inciting a rebellion, inciting a riot to justify a crackdown, to justify oppression. But as we know from Ferris, as we know from Rebels, they will lose control of that situation. Tyrants, whenever they try to incite an instant to justify oppression, will lose control of the situation. Tyrants, respect the rule of law, respect constitutional order. That is how you truly stay in power, by not provoking the people. That is a very radical message to say, but that is the message that Star Wars Andor, Who Are You, are giving to us. Plus, they made me care about Ciro's mother, actually feel sympathy for her. How? It showed us she does love her son in an overbearing way, but deep down, and same thing with Jedha. She's, I think, actually grown fond of Ciro, and losing Ciro in the riot, I think, will affect her. Now, will she double down? Is a different story. We gotta see that all in the next episode, but this episode had something to say. It made us feel something, and it accomplished that goal. There's more I can talk about. I could talk about each individual character, how stuff, but the parallel to Felix is spot on. The people gather to the memorial, even though it's a trap. People recognized it was a trap, but they still did it anyhow because, yes, it may have been the tactically maybe not sound thing, but it was probably the morally right thing to take the stand in that moment. And as we know from other stories, this incident helped spark and galvanize the rebellion against the Empire and against Imperial tyranny as a whole. From a internal universe story, that stuff works perfectly. It feeds into it. You got the Ghormans also trying to relay their message, what actually happened out to the world, so that way the Empire is not dictating the narrative. We know Mon Mothma will take a stand. She'll probably rely on those transmissions from Ghorman. I had hoped Cassian would capture Ciro because there was a moment where Ciro was like overwhelmed and you might think like, he's saying, this is not what I stood up for. But seeing Cassian in the crowd, that brought him back to square one. He once again became that pre-Mormolana cop who was trying to capture a thief, a person, a murderer. He went back to square one. Any potential chance he had at redemption was gone. He regressed back to who he was way back in episode 1. And that's why Ciro has always been an antagonist, always been a villain. Villains and antagonists generally do not learn. They generally do not grow. They often will double down. They often will reject character growth. I'm interested in seeing how this event will change Jedha because she's clearly overwhelmed by this. She had grown fond of Ciro despite the fact I'm pretty sure the relationship began as manipulation, had very toxic on both sides. But it was kind of like they were toxic to each other and somehow that made it healthy for themselves and was starting to bring out the better part in each other. But Ciro regressed. Will Jedha regress? She's set up as a villain. Will she have an Agent Cassian moment? I don't know. Remember, we got Lonnie too, who's we didn't see him at all in this episode because he's back on Coruscant being Lucian's spy, I'm sure. He might see Jedha is now struggling and start poking at her, trying to, either get her to slip up or something or even defect. I could see that. There's a lot of interesting stuff because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. This episode has a lot of interesting stuff that can go forward, but the most important thing is it showed us the Ghorman massacre. It made us in the audience feel something. And that, I think, was deliberate. We saw the inciting incident that we needed from the big Mon Mothma moment coming in the next episode, and it made us, the audience, feel something and hopefully take something away from it. That's what I got to say. What do you have to say? The comment section is down below. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episode 9, Welcome to the Rebellion. So, a lot happens in this episode. It's basically dealing with two parts. The political fallout from the Ghorman massacre and Mon Mothma's speech, and also Cassian and basically his role in the rebellion. Those are the two main parts, and the title is so fitting. Mon Mothma, she gives her speech. The speech that we knew was coming. The speech that we saw a brief clip of the Star Wars Rebels. Cassian helps her get out of the Senate. And good thing he was there, because there was an ISB plant in the team that was going to extract Mon Mothma from the Senate. I do think the other members would have definitely tried to stop the ISB plant, but having an extra person there definitely did help. And obviously, Cassian's not the one who brings Mothma to Yavin. We know from Star Wars Rebels that Gold Squadron and Phoenix Cell that do the bulk of that work. But it makes sense to spread out the thing, though. Cassian got back to Yavin with a lot less difficulty than Mon Mothma did. Perhaps Mon Mothma should have hitched the ride, but what happened in Star Wars Rebels is definitely probably a little bit better for propaganda. And actually, I do appreciate how they didn't repeat that, just alluded that that's how it's going to go. So I kind of wish they had made a mention to Phoenix Cell. Oh well, that's my only complaint about that. But, so Mon Mothma, she's now in the Wars of the Rebellion properly, but we probably won't see that until the last 3 episodes. But Cassian, he's tired. He's ready to basically retire from the rebellion, live a life with Bix. Of course, Bix sees that he's needed the rebellion, so she decides for them to choose the rebellion. So she hops outside on transport probably to help another rebel base or another rebel cell somewhere. And so that way Cassian has to commit to the rebellion. That he, basically the choice is taken away from him because based off of the experience with the Force Healer from the previous episode, Bix has determined that the rebellion needs Cassian, that once they win, once they defeat the Empire, then they can have the required life together. So, about that, we know what's going to happen in Rogue One. But this was, I think, really good follow-up. There's a lot of smaller things I can further discuss. But seeing basically a little bit of the particular injury, the ISB trying to stop Mon Mothma from her speech, but failing. Bail Organa getting things ready for Mon Mothma in the Senate, and you can tell they used a chain of allies to get Mon Mothma's speech going in a way that the Empire can't, get everyone else for. And then the Empire tries to get Mon Mothma, but she gets out, as I said earlier. There's more to discuss, so the comment section is down below. So now that we talked about each individual episode, let's take a look at the episodes as a whole, how they all fit together. So, Episode 7, Messenger, is supposed to be ramping up the tension for us, getting us reconnected with what's going on, getting us back in, knowing that things are coming to a head. Episode 8 is supposed to be the inciting incident, the incident that catches everyone's attention, and Episode 9 is supposed to be the fallout from said incident, which they do so superbly. They are feeding into each other, are built off of each other. Now, some character plots may be dropped for the sake of story. We don't need to see what happened to Jedha after the Ghorman massacre. That's not important to the story. Yes, we want to know, and we'll probably see the fallout from that on her end in the terms of the next 3 episodes. But in here, all we need to know from Episode 8 was that this was not it did not go the way she was expecting, mainly because of Cyril. So we know that. That's all we needed to know. But when it came to Welcome to the Rebellion, what mattered was seeing Mon Mothma take the stand and seeing her get to safety. That's all we needed to know. And because of Star Wars Rebels, we don't even need to see her get to Yavin. We know she'll get to Yavin. So we do not need to see that. We just need to be told that we are shown that Cassian gets her out of the Senate safely, and then we are told, and Gold Squadron, plus Phoenix Cell as well, will be, even though they're not mentioned directly, will be the ones that actually get her to Yavin. That's what we needed to see. And this does it well. Tony Gilroy, the actors, Dina Luga, and everyone else involved with Star Wars Andor know how to tell a story, and they're doing a really, really, really good job at it and exceeding very well. They're also making a story that has not only something to say, but makes you feel stuff. I already addressed that when I talked about Episode 8, but no work of fiction has made me feel in the way that it had. Probably something to do with how well they just constructed the story, that they were able to invoke those emotions in me. I'm sure I'm not the only one as well. And there's many small things, like I forgot to mention that I'm pretty sure we're going to get K2SO now, because at the end of the Ghorman massacre, Cassian captures thanks to Ghorman, captures and disables a KX droid, and at the end of Welcome to the Rebellion, they are reactivating, and he seems like quite a pleasant chap. I know many of us had the theory that perhaps K2SO has a bit of B2's programming, and that still would be nice, because I still want to know what happened to B2. Is he still on the farming plane? Is he safe? Tell me he is safe. But the point being is with Welcome to the Rebellion, it's not just welcoming Mon Mothma into the Rebellion, but it's welcoming Cassian into the Rebellion proper, even though he's the one who gives that line to Mon Mothma. But Bix, by going on her own to probably serve the rebellion in a different fashion, away from Cassian, is what allows Cassian to stay in the rebellion and truly become a part of the rebellion in a way he wasn't before. They've done a great job with all this. They've weaved the story fantastically, and I really can't wait to see where the next episodes go. Let's keep the discussion going on in the comment section down below. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of the last 3 episodes of Star Wars Andor. Episode 10, Make It Stop. Episode 11, Who Else Knows? And Episode 12, Jedha, Kyber, Erso. So these are the final 3 episodes, and they're designed to set up the events of Rogue One. I have timestamps below for each individual episode, and then we're going to have a conclusion at the very end. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episode 14, Make It Stop. So this is primarily a Lucen and Kaylee episode. Kaylee, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is Lucen's assistant, and we get to learn how they meet and their backstories through flashbacks in this episode that are interspaced with the main action of the episode, because the episode basically opens up with Lonnie informing Lucen of basically the Death Star, though he doesn't quite know that yet, but knows that the Empire's energy project is actually a front for a secret weapon that Krennic is making, and we know that to be the Death Star. And Lucen kills Lonnie to, keep loose ends from falling apart. He could have taken Lonnie to a safe house and Yavin, and I'm sure Lonnie would have been a great asset for the rebellion, but no, Lucen couldn't do that. He needs to get out of his secret mindset. That's not quite the rebellion anymore. Secrecy, yes, but not as secret as it used to be. But anyhow, then Lucen is confronted in his shop by Jedha. Him and Kaylee had already basically planned to shut the operation down, destroy the evidence, because thanks to Lonnie, they knew Jedha was onto them and planning a raid. And Lucen has this great line where he says that there's basically only 2 suspect items in the shop. He's implying that's about some of the artifacts he has on display in his gallery, and he picks up a knife as a demonstration. But he's really talking about himself and Jedha. That is just great storytelling there from the team. And to prevent himself from being tortured and revealed information, he stabs himself with that knife. Now, Jedha does try to save him because she wants to interrogate him and all that. But that doesn't go quite well because Kaylee decides to infiltrate the hospital and take Lucen off of life support to ensure that he dies, which is something I'm sure they discussed. But through the flashbacks, we do reveal that, while yes, they have a very strong professional relationship, there is also a little bit of a father-daughter relationship going there. And you can see that because Kaylee teared up when she took Lucen off of life support. So many great scenes there, so much more to discuss, such as Jedha basically getting in trouble for the ISP for basically being too impatient conducting the raid a little sooner. But good thing she did in a way, because I'm sure Lucen had a lot more plans to destroy things in his shop than he got around to because of her going in early. But the Empire, I have a feeling, is going to punish her for not following their timetable because she's no longer useful to them. But those are just my thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Welcome to the Jedha Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episode 11, Who Else Knows? So, things are picking up. Kaylee sends a message to Cassian, basically say, hey, got important information, come quick, and using an older code that's also an emergency code as well. Now, Cassian brings K2SO, who we can see he has some sass, just like we know him. And he also brings Meshi as well. They go to Coruscant to extract Lucen and Kaylee, or at least hear what they have to say, not knowing that Lucen is dead. Meanwhile, the Empire is trying to find Kaylee because, well, she likely knows what Lucen knows and they want to interrogate her. So everything's closing in, and I have to say, it is just a great episode with the suspense ticking, especially at the very end. The Imperial's tracking beacon as they're trying to trace in on the source of Kaylee's communication, because Lucen didn't get a chance to destroy everything, they were able to intercept the transmission and they have a trace. And the tracing equipment has this beep, and it's And it's getting louder and louder near the end as the ISB is closing in on Kaylee and Cassian and Meshi because they're there now. Meanwhile, Erso, he's guarding their ship, but he notices the comms have been cut, and he goes to take out the Empire. And I just love how when the ISB tag team people ask him, "Are you one of ours?" He says no, knocks him off the bridge. And granted, things are not going well for anyone right now. It's tense, it's exciting, and also Yavin, they're mad at Cassian for going on his own once again, and they confine him to his quarters because he helped them with that. But it's a good thing that Cassian is going on his own basically because the rebels need this information badly. And there's also some tension about, Kaylee does not expect Yavin to basically listen to her and wants Cassian to relay the information, but might be better if both of them go and plus, she could probably be a pretty good use in the rebellion. Knows a fair bit about communication, could be quite beneficial. There's more to go on. Jedha, despite basically being in trouble and looking like her career is in the gutters, she does give one of her fellow ISB officers some advice that actually does help them narrow it down. So that shows that even once she's in a situation where she should be looking out for herself truly first and foremost, she is still helping the Empire. But that's what I got to say. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and this is my review of the 12th and final episode of Star Wars Andor Season 2. Jedha, Kyber, Erso. So this episode is leading us directly into Rogue One, and they do a phenomenal job at it. But more than that, it's also about trusting Lucen's intel, trusting that what he got out of the ISB is not false, and that his sacrifice essentially wasn't in vain. And due to other things going on, the rebels decide, you know what? We probably should trust the intel. There's enough going on, other weird stuff, that if it is a trap, it's a darn good trap, and we should though take it seriously anyhow, take this intel seriously, because they know Saw's on Jedha, and that's one of the things from Lucen's intel. There's a destroyer above Jedha. There's a contact in Saw's group that will only speak to Cassian. That's how Cassian gets released from being grounded, and then he's sent to the Rigging Kafrine to get that intel. And we know where that leads to there. But there's more going on as well. We see the beginning of the squabbling of the rebel high command and leadership and all that we see again in Rogue One. And that includes a few of the plays we saw in Rogue One as well, showing that they're not quite united yet, and this intel, because there's going to be another meeting, and we know that meeting that they mentioned is actually the meeting in Rogue One. Such good connections there. But we also get to see where all our characters ended up. We know Cassian, he's getting ready to head on to the Rigging Kafrine in the events of Rogue One. Meshi and plus several of the others that we later see in Rogue One on scale with helping Cassian extract the intel on the Death Star, the actual intel that they need to destroy it. We see him training with them in the jungle, the forests of Yavin. We get to see Will Major Pargast. We get to see him. He's listening to Namek's manifesto, and I think it might be speaking to him. Everything that's going he's either overwhelmed with it and he takes his own life, or he decides to wake up and that's his act of defiance, a small little bit. But I don't think it was a coincidence that he was listening to Namek's manifesto when he made that decision. Then we also get on top of all of that too, we see what happens with Jedha. Well, she's in a prison just like on Narkina 5. She lost everything and she breaks down sobbing because of it. She lost everything. But we also get to see what happens with Bix. There's a scene where Vel employs Cassian to reconnect with Bix, and he says to do it after, but we know he won't. But we see what's going on with Bix. She's living on the planet that we saw at the very beginning in Season 1 where Bix, Brasso, Willem, and Cassian, and B2 were living. B2 is still there playing with the other droids, but Bix, she's taking care of an infant. I'm pretty sure that's Bix and Cassian's child that will never get to see their father. And that's just tragic. But I think Vel knows that and wanted Cassian to try to reconnect, try to learn that he has a child. And we know tragedy that won't connect. It's tear-jerking, really. There's so much there. I'm sure I missed some stuff, but the pieces are in place for Rogue One. You can watch Star Wars Andor, Star Wars Rogue One, the Star Wars story, I should say, and A New Hope all together, and you have one cohesive narrative. There might be a bit of a jump to like, okay, why are we following this Luke Skywalker character? How does he fit into all this? And that's the only rapid jump going on there, but it is a cohesive narrative, and it all flows into each other and does support each other, except for the real jump, but it does essentially work. Though, I gotta say, I was looking in the background, I was hoping I could see a reference to Star Wars Rebels somehow. I was hoping for it. I may just not have been observant enough. But the point I'm making here is that this episode did a phenomenal job at closing the season up and laying the groundwork for the next story. It did what a prequel needs to do. It showed us what we needed to know for the next story, while also leading into it in a what I believe to be a satisfying way. So that's where I'm going to end my review of Star Wars Andor Season 2, Episode 12, and the season as a whole, because there's not much more to say, but I will have some other thoughts, so stay tuned for that in my next video. And let me know in the comment section down below, what are your thoughts on this episode and the previous 2 episodes as well. So now that we took a look at Star Wars Andor Season 2 in its pieces, let's take a look at it as a whole unit, because that's what the show is doing. A whole unit, a whole story that, despite the time jumps between each block of episodes, is telling one consistent story. Season 1 was much more, in my opinion, focused on Cassian and getting him introduced into the rebellion and willing to rebel. All about him waking up and taking action. And Season 2, he's taking action. It's all about him staying in that action and the events that he's a part of, contributing to not only the formation of the rebellion, but also helping us lead into the events in Rogue One and the events surrounding it. There are events that go on that truly have nothing to do directly with Cassian, but are important either for understanding the characters in his life, the characters that are influencing him, impacting him, or are important for setting up the events of Rogue One. They all feed into each other. Andor Season 2 and Andor Season 1 as well have been a masterpiece of storytelling. And it does, like I said earlier, perfectly lead into Rogue One. In fact, I want to rewatch Rogue One and make a new review. Rogue One was the very first Star Wars movie I ever reviewed for this channel, way back, 2016 I believe? It's been quite some time. And it deserves for me to rewatch and take a new look, especially in the context of everything that we have seen in Star Wars Andor. But this review is specifically focusing on Season 2. There's a lot of small moments here and there, small moments of storytelling techniques that I never got to mention because there was just so much going on, so much important stuff that the small stuff I've been unable to comment on and impart my opinion, my judgment, my reaction to them, whatever adjective we want to use to describe all that. Star Wars Andor Season 2 told a great story and it led in perfectly. I can't stress that enough. But those small moments that I failed to mention are what makes this show so good. The team had an immaculate attention to detail. They accomplished so much stuff that to break down everything will take a lot longer than I'm giving myself for this video. But in summary, pay attention to those small details. Small things here and there. These are not like Easter eggs, though they do have a few things like that. What these small things are. These are things that enrich the story, that contribute to a sense of realism, to help contribute to a sense of, well, the suspension of disbelief. The small things that bring you into the story, that make the story feel real and timeless. Yes, the story may be set in a galaxy far, far away, but it calls upon history, it calls upon current events, it calls upon so much stuff that you can't help but feel that they are telling a real story. And even in the small scenes where they do bring in the Force, it feels like very much the same way where how sometimes it feels very much the same as when you're watching a World War II dramatization and the chaplain says, God bless you, or something like that. Very small. Feels like it's a part of the world the way normal people would interact with it rather than the people who do sense the Force, who do have that stronger connection than the average person. They made the world feel real. And by doing that, they've made the story so much better for it. Star Wars Andor is probably the best piece of Star Wars media ever created. Some of the books are probably the only times you can actually rival the story, the world building, the attention to detail. Andor achieved greatness, in my opinion. Krennic may have complained in Rogue One that they were this close to greatness, but here is true greatness. But those are just my thoughts. I would love to hear yours in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like and share. Also, consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all my latest content. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the Force be with you always.